So first of all, I'll just talk a bit about our startup. Let me see if we can advance the slide here. Yeah. So about Lentera Africa, we are a one-stop shop for precision agriculture, so climate smart inputs and conservation agriculture. The reason we exist is to enable farmers adapt to climate change. We all know that it's getting harder to grow crops profitably and sustainably, but also we want to be at the transition from like the conventional chemical-based polluting agriculture to a more sustainable but high-yielding agriculture that works in harmony with the environment and restores the land. So in our offering, we do precision agriculture, which is software and ground sensors and imaging to offer custom advice to farmers, but also we formulate high-performing crop inputs. These are organic inputs that restore the soil carbon and restore the pH of the land. And then also we train farmers on conservation agriculture, so showing them techniques on how to grow food sustainably with the environment, such as minimum tillage and using regenerative techniques. So our perspectives from the Land Accelerator, I guess our key takeaways. So we took part in the first Land Accelerator. So it was a deep dive. We had 3 days, very intensive deep dive into the financial model and budgeting. So I remember very well, we reviewed our financial models, our budget. We also spent a lot of time refining our pitch. So I remember doing 3 iterations of pitch practice with peer review. As an entrepreneur, it can be a very lonely world. You rarely get chances to get honest and critical feedback. So this was a great chance to get feedback, not only from the mentors in the program, but also from fellow entrepreneurs. We also had a couple of technical sessions on certification, market access, how to manage tree nurseries for forest reforestation and different business plans around tree nurseries and the like. And that was great because it was good to hear from the best in the industry. And then we had perspectives in financing. The implementing partner at the time had a very strong link to investors, and they were an entrepreneur themselves, and they were able to help us see not only from our perspective in the land restoration business, but also from the perspective of the investors who are looking at return and impact. And then we have had, up to today, ongoing business mentorship. I think the immediate short-term results out of that is with our refined financial model. We went on to raise $50K US working capital loan in the next year in 2019. And then, so we did the accelerator towards the end of 2018. By the beginning of 2019, with our refined pitch, with all the feedback we had, we won 2 business pitch competition with a total of $15,000 awards. I think what I liked about the pitch, it wasn't just about the content and the PowerPoint, but it also looked a lot into how we deliver the pitch. As an entrepreneur, especially as a technical entrepreneur, you know your subject matter very well, but sometimes we forget about our audience and how to make it convincing and how to break down our value proposition to different audiences. So that I can say was really good. We've also had ongoing mentorship and linkages, both from the Land Accelerator, but also from the fellow entrepreneurs. So we have a network now, a Pan-African network of Land Accelerator entrepreneurs, and hopefully with the onboarding of the Land Accelerator in Asia, we'll have a wider network that we can collaborate, launch new projects, share technologies. For example, with our satellite-based crop monitoring service, we've been able to assist one entrepreneur who's doing forestry to monitor their land and to see the vegetative change over time. So that has been really cool. So I think I'll stop there. That slide has our info, so always ready to collaborate and hear more about what you're doing. And I'll stop there unless there are any questions.
All right, let me see if we do have, I don't think that we might have any questions yet, but I want to remind people, go ahead and check in the chats, in the Q&A box when you do start to have some questions. We'll definitely be able to have a discussion towards the end after our other 2 speakers as well. So with that, I believe Karthik was going to be our second speaker, if that's correct. And if it's not correct, please let me know, and Amit will go next.
No, I'm happy to speak.
Okay, great.
All right. Can everyone see my screen now?
Let me see. Yes, looks full screen to me. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karthik Chandresekar. I represent Sangam Ventures, also AIC Sangam, which is our incubator. And we are a seed early stage fund focused around climate change. And we believe in tackling climate change through entrepreneurship, and mainly because most of climate change is anthropogenic, which makes investing in startups that are helping customers, consumers, or producers make more sustainable choices the most meaningful tool to fight climate change. And within that, I think as an investor, we are a science and technology focused investor. So a lot of our investments so far have been in engineering startups making batteries and biogas plants and electric buses. We have done a few investments in the agriculture side around pumps, but what we are looking for is basically to kind of look at land restoration as a critical opportunity for both mitigation and adaptation, right? And there is a significant opportunity that is not coming to the investment ecosystem today, which is specifically linked to land restoration in the private capital markets, as Amanda pointed out as well. And a lot of this is because a lot of land restoration work is in the commons, which is basically areas or opportunities where there's no direct potential for creating economic value. And that's where ideas that you bring forward as entrepreneurs can give us the opportunity to kind of come forward with private capital and potentially kind of build that space forward. And if we don't do that, I think the risk is that climate change can actually negate all the development gains from the last few decades, right? So for Sangam, as an investor, what we are looking for is basically entrepreneurs who are working around land restoration and regenerative agriculture. And we are as much interested in companies that are doing, say, organic farming, which is what most consumers understand as sustainable, or climate smart agriculture, which is where most of the farm ecosystem is today. But we need to step one level beyond, looking mainly at restoring land and specifically working around either degraded land improvement or looking at preserving forests, right? And what that means is, as an entrepreneur, you have a mandate that you need to take on around improving soil carbon and improving the soil microbiome, which basically kind of is the soil organic matter. And that basically kind of links to what is SDG 15, which is life on land, and basically protecting, restoring, and promoting sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. And basically with a focus around how much of improvement we have in either soil carbon or soil organic matter, right? And so, that's basically us as an investor. So what are most other investors looking for? You'll see investors who are talking about tackling climate change. You look at investors talking about protecting nature, talking about ensuring nutrition, improving livelihoods. You got Amit, who's coming up after me from Upaya, an investor who has a strong focus on rural livelihoods. You have investors like hedge funds, basically looking at these opportunities from a risk management perspective. You obviously, all investors in the private sector have some level of return expectation. And then lastly, it's repetition that they are looking for, right? And oddly enough, if you look at the study and the surveys, resilience against climate change is the most commonly cited reason for doing natural capital investments, but most of the large investors are actually looking at reputation as what's the most important to them, right? So what's the answer? It depends on the investor. So I think what you want to do is understand yourself as land restoration entrepreneurs, and then understand your investors, spend the time understanding who might be the right investor for you, and then moving forward to find the right investor for you, right? And so, depending on where you're at in terms of your your journey, or in terms of the impact that you're looking to create, you basically kind of pick the investor that's right for you, right? And so if you look at land restoration, I think you want to first, decide which bucket you fall under, in terms of, you could be working with standing forests, which is basically going into forest areas or existing forests and looking for opportunities where the forests can be maintained or improved with economic activity, and ideally benefiting the local ecosystem and the communities that need to support that, right? The second is obvious, is what's more commonly cited, which is agricultural production, and basically making agriculture more focused around regenerative practices, where agriculture actually improves the quality of carbon and soil over time. Right? And the last one, which quite a few companies are now working on, is actually building forests out of degraded land and bringing more of the degraded land, which Amanda cited, which is at a significant portion of the overall global landmass, back into the forest area. So basically, the first step for you is to pick where you are. Are you working on standing forest? Are you working on agriculture? Are you working on basically forestry growth, right? And there are multiple examples of companies that are trying different ways to preserve either forests, or do smart agriculture, or basically bring new forests to life, right? So case an example is a company called Avani here in India, which actually is taking pine needles that fall on the forest ground and use it as a feedstock for biomass gasifiers to supply electricity to the local communities. And they work very closely with the forest department as well as the local communities to make this work. And the impact is prevention of forest fires that rage across the Western Himalayas. And they've basically decided on a for-profit model to basically build this ecosystem out. A second example is a company called Forestwise, which basically operates in Borneo, looking at collecting forest produce, so non-timber forest produce from the local forests, to basically bring products to the consumer markets, with a focus on educating customers on rainforest preservation, right? And again, now this is a company which focuses not just on the community, but also focuses on marketing, distribution, and how they basically bring the messaging forward to their consumers. An example of a company working in the agriculture value chain is a company called Good Nature Agro, which actually works specifically with legumes, and looking at legumes as an opportunity to improve soil carbon and soil nitrogen, and basically kind of make that ecosystem work for farmers to be able to do multi-cropping and preserve more of the land as they basically grow their crop. So most of the regions in East Africa that they operate basically have cash crops, which are wheat and maize, but then basically bringing in legumes improves the livelihoods of the farmers, but also kind of improves the soil quality. Another company, Kumaza, which works in Kenya, actually has taken a model where they help farmers with an ecosystem where they supply them with seeds, training, and value chain to grow timber on their marginal land, and then basically provide that financing all the way to when to the point where the timber is harvested, right? And they've again taken a for-profit model and raised capital to kind of grow that business over time. And finally, a company that's working on restoring degraded land, the Land Life Company, has basically developed technology, and that's very similar to what Lentera and Moses are doing, which is basically using technology to kind of optimize and bring efficiencies into land restoration services, and basically kind of providing it almost like an infrastructure or a service model on a per hectare basis to kind of bring back both forests, but also kind of looking at improving the food security and the economic opportunities that are provided to the people who live on those lands, right? So these are just quick examples, and we have tried to keep it open-ended in terms of examples, because we do want you to come and tell us about what you're working on, and we are always open to learning more about opportunities where you can have better ways of improving degraded land. And it could be anything from like actually bringing back wild honeybees to the ecosystem, to ensure that there is sufficient pollination in the land, right? So I think the biggest thing that you want to focus on as entrepreneurs is basically what is your core, and what is it that's the impact that you want to create, right? So as investors, typically if we ran an acceleration program, we go through this 4-step process of thinking about how would you build your business, which is basically who are your customers, who will buy your product, why would they buy your product, what's the value proposition, what's the product market fit, right? And once you have that, and then you want to build your business, you want to understand how will you make money, and then basically go look for investors to kind of fund your growth to kind of the next level, right? But if you're a land restoration entrepreneur, we think that you might want to do something a little more, right? So you might want to start with what is the land degradation issue you're looking to solve, and then within that, make sure you are very clear on the regenerative model that you're proposing. So what's the long-term impact of the intervention on people and planet? And then once you have that understanding of what is the impact that you want to do from an environment, land restoration perspective, make sure that you kind of ask yourself, how will you and the community make money? So what's the economic value that you're generating for yourself and the community? And then go out and look for the investors. So that means you need to do double the work, right? So you need to do this, where you question, where are you creating the environmental impact, and then incrementally kind of go back and look at how you're going to basically make your business sustainable. And so one of the big things that always comes up is, we are not at the stage where we are investment ready, or we need basically capital for proving our concept, and we agree with you, right? So there's not the same type of capital available at different stages. And I think depending on the stage you're at, you really need to kind of evaluate who are the people who could support you, and as well as who are the investors or capital providers that you need to go to, right? So if you're basically looking at a pathway to scaling up your solution, you need to start with, do you have a pilot design to test your regenerative model and the value you want to create for yourself and the community? And so at that point, your source of resources or capital is going to be your partners, your local community, the NGOs that you work with, or other partners that you work with, potentially your customers through crowdfunding or kind of getting into forward contracts, and also capacity building organizations. In India, there are organizations like the IFC Advisory, GIZ, TechnoServe that also kind of provide that capacity building support, right? And then if you are getting ready towards looking at investments, you can actually access local incubators or accelerators, including the one that you're talking to or listening to, about getting some seed capital to keep moving forward, right? And at the same time, there are capital providers, even at the earlier stages, like Sangam or Paya or others, and angel investors specifically in your local regions, who might be able to provide you with that kind of small angel round to kind of get your company started. The next step then is basically kind of defining what ecosystem that you want to finance looks like, and kind of putting a project proposal together and getting from a lot of organizations today globally that would fund an initial project at some scale, right? And that includes organizations like Convergent Finance. The UNEP's CAF organization is building up a similar project financing assistance facility. And then once you have a proven model at some level of scale, you can then take that and basically look at scale-up financing, where you could get your more traditional equity capital investors, look for short-term debt for working capital if you're a market-driven company, or more of a marketplace company where you need to kind of fund your working capital, as well as kind of looking at long-term debt financing for the projects that you want to start, right? So it's basically the first step would be to evaluate where you are at in your startup journey, and then get yourself to have those key conversations with the right partners at the right stage of your startup's evolution. And one of the other questions that we always get asked is, where do we start, right? Especially when you're working with smallholder farmers or rural or tribal communities. Do I start with capacity building, but what about marketing or retail? Or should I basically build a brand and then basically make sure that I have the customers lined up before I can kind of go out and aggregate the farmers or the rural communities, right? There is no right answer. And what is important is, as an entrepreneur, you need to evaluate or define what your core capabilities are. So you might be an engineer who comes with a technology background, who can come up with precision agriculture solutions or drones or other kind of technologies like Moses did. Or you could basically be somebody who's great at working on the ground with farmers or tribal communities and bringing them together. That's something that you need to define, and you need to basically do what you are really good at to kind of get started. That's the only point I would have. And as you stabilize your first starting point, you want to keep adding the right resources before you go and attack the next problem or opportunity. So if you start with capacity building or aggregation, and then you want to kind of set up a manufacturing or processing unit, bring in the right resource to help you do that. That includes bringing in the amount of capital that you might need to set up a manufacturing unit, right? And you got to do that repeatedly as you grow and you scale. And obviously, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who come to us and say, we want to do everything. And I don't push back on that. I think you just want to do everything in a very systematic way. And so what you need is everything to come together for you to kind of build that company that will be scalable, right? So start with sales, then build on systems, and then build a team that can execute that plan or vision that you create. And the way to think about it for especially early stage entrepreneurs is think of it as risks that you eliminate, and basically as you eliminate risks, you create more value for your enterprise, right? So rather than just thinking in terms of sales or sales numbers, you want to kind of define what are the assumptions or risks that you are taking on as an entrepreneur, and systematically kind of eliminate each of those risks by bringing in the right resources or proving the right hypotheses as you kind of build on your business. And what that means as well is basically do the hard things, do the critical things for your business first. So that's the big rocks theory. So do the first things first. If you basically keep doing everything that's convenient or coming to you, customers who are easy to find, but they're not kind of in line with your long-term vision, you'll end up filling up your jar with sand, and then you won't have any space to kind of put in the big things that you really wanted to achieve, right? So focus on prioritizing and doing the big things first. Some quick do's and don'ts for the folks who are just looking for advice around pitching and fundraising. Do leverage your existing investors or accelerators connects. I think introductions work the best when you're trying to raise capital. Get yourself in a positive frame of mind. It is hard. There are a lot more rejects that you might get before you get to the investor who says yes. But that, again, going back to what I started with, not all investors are the same. So them saying no might just mean that they are looking for something else. Doesn't mean that you are doing something wrong. So get yourself into a positive frame of mind. Enjoy it while you're doing it. And something that we recommend everybody do, and that's something that you will get if you join an acceleration program, is get yourself a personal coach. You really want to kind of be doing this with a lot of practice, a lot of feedback, and from somebody who can really help you improve, right? Whenever you're talking about about a company as an entrepreneur, you want to be talking about the team you have rather than just yourself, because that's what basically the entrepreneurs in the investor is investing into, right? And as long as you're humble, you're perfectly okay to keep following up as often as you need to get that cash in the bank. Yep. So that's some quick to-dos and some quick don'ts. Don't lose your swagger. Confidence is key. We've seen a lot of entrepreneurs kind of get dejected with the whole fundraising process. It's very important that you stay confident. Don't apologize or make excuses. We have seen a lot of entrepreneurs say, I know we only have X, or I know we only have just started and we don't have enough proof points today, but don't do that, right? Don't apologize. You basically are doing a great job. You've started off, you're kind of building your business. You just need to put out the vision that you're basically building as an entrepreneur. Last, don't whine, complain, or get angry about the process. It doesn't help. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help the ecosystem. Just work through that process, and it's a very structured process to go through. Hopefully you get to the other side through that. And just from a pure statistic perspective, what correlates to entrepreneurial success is actually nothing to do with having a professional degree or having professional experience, right? So what correlates to entrepreneurial success is, for most part, discipline. So focusing on sales and marketing early, making sure you have an eye on the cash, so stressing financial controls, and ideally not competing on price early in the game, right? Focus on what's this service you can provide to your customers, what kind of a quality, what kind of a brand you can build with your customers, and ideally kind of keep it simple. So focus on a single product or service in a single market, mainly because you are otherwise going to kind of stretch yourself too thin. So go through this in a systematic fashion, identify the opportunity, plan your business, get the right resources in place, and then build your product or service forward, right? And the last bit, obviously, is it's good. And I think Moses mentioned it. Entrepreneurship is a very lonely journey. Being a CEO is hard. You really want to kind of find a peer group, right? So joining an accelerator like the Land Accelerator that caters specifically to entrepreneurs like you is a great way to get yourself to move forward in that systematic fashion, right? So you get an opportunity to structure your pathway to scale and really get feedback and refining your story. And the most important bit is you get the right peer group of entrepreneurs that you can work with, discuss, learn from, and work with some great mentors, advisors, and hopefully meet the right investors like Amit, who comes up next after me. And hopefully we get to be a part of your journey. Yeah? Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Karthik, as well. I think that we'd like to invite Amit to come forward right now. So if you can stop sharing your screen, Karthik, and then Amit will be able to start sharing his, and we'll be able to hear from his point of view. Amit, are you there?
You should be able to hear me and see my screen on full screen mode.
It's full screen mode. That looks great.
Thanks, Amanda. And thanks, Karthik, for the kind words. So hi, everyone. My name is Amit Anthony Alex. I'm the India Country Director for Upaya Social Ventures. We are an early stage impact investor. We have a very specific focus of identifying companies that will create employment or livelihood generating opportunities for people who are considered in extreme poverty. We are usually the first investor in the companies we invest in, and we work very closely with our companies to help scale them up. Our key sort of metric that we measure in terms of impact as investors we create is the number of jobs that have been created for the poor. What I will try and do during the 10 minutes that I talk about is to give you an idea about Upaya Social Ventures, the investment focus that we have, and I can finish my presentation by giving you an idea in terms of how Upaya's investment thesis aligns with land restoration. We've made 16 investments so far. Out of the 16, you can see we have spread across India. Most of our investments are in tier 2, tier 3 towns, and they span across different sectors, skill development, waste management, agriculture, rural manufacturing. And out of the 16 investments we've done, we've been the first investor in 11 of them. We also run an accelerator program. What we realized is a lot of the early stage companies that we work with there is a mismatch in terms of how an investor sees a business and how an entrepreneur showcases their business. Therefore, we select up to 12 companies every year and work very closely with them over a period of about 5 months. During this time, we primarily focus on 3 areas. The first one being fundraising, given that all the entrepreneurs that apply for Upaya's accelerator program is looking for fundraising. We're helping them build their financial model, really linking that to the story that they are, pitching to investors, and helping them find sort of the pitch deck, and then really finding the right connect between the right set of investors and the entrepreneurs that we work with. The second area that we work with, and we are impact investors, is helping companies track their social impact. helping them develop their theory of change, the different metrics that they would want to track social impact, and from there, in terms of how to communicate that social impact as well. It could be to customers, for example, it could be to investors, it could be to other stakeholders. And sort of the third area that we work with companies very closely during the Accelerator program is on leadership development and organizational development. Given that most of the companies that we work with are early stage, a lot of onus is on the entrepreneur. So helping the entrepreneur really reflect on their leadership style and how they want to build the organizational culture as they grow, and then helping them develop sort of hiring and organizational strategies. From the Upaya's Accelerator program is primarily how we invest in our or invest in companies that become part of our portfolio. Which leads me to my next slide, which is how does Upaya, look at a company for investment? As I said, the number one thing that we look at is the potential of a company to create jobs. So jobs are broadly identified as employment opportunity or livelihood opportunity. We also look at the quality of jobs, which is if there is a financial linkage between you and a person whom we consider as a job holder, what is the impact that you're creating? What is the delta increase in income, and how effective is that to bring that person out of poverty? And the third focus is we are investors, right? So we look at the potential for the company to grow and where could Upaya as an investor get a potential exit. In terms of the instruments that Upaya does, we do equity investment of up to $50,000, and our geographical focus area is in India. So this is how we look at companies when we select them for investment. And linking all of this back to sort of how we look at sort of from a financing for land restoration businesses, we clearly see that land restoration businesses, as Karthik was talking about, has a potential to prevent migration, and that happens when there is an employment and income generating opportunities for people in extreme poverty. We look at companies that can potentially create jobs or increase in income for at least 1,000 people in 3 years. And we look at those kind of models that can, as I said, be able to scale, create potential positive cash flow in the next 3 to 5 years. So that's how we look at land restoration, or companies within the land restoration business. One example of a company that we have supported in the past, who were part of Upaya's, I believe, 2019 or 2018 Accelerator program, is a company called IKEA Organics that works with about 2,000 farmers in the state of Uttar Pradesh, helping them move to what is known as zero budget natural farming, wherein there is decreased or almost negligible use of any chemicals. And then they teach them how to regenerate the soil and grow produces that the farmers can consume by themselves. Upaya's interest to lay out some sort of investment philosophy was the 2,000 farmers that they were working with were small and marginalized farmers. And by bringing sort of the market connect, they were bringing an increase of income to the farmers. So that's where Upaya came in, or the angle that Upaya saw these companies. And, from a larger sort of impact point of view, they were helping regenerate or restore the farmlands. So just to summarize, Upaya does early stage investments. We look at companies that create employment or income generating opportunities. And my last two sentences would be, as you think of applying for the Land Accelerator program, be clear about what you want to get out of the accelerator program. Funding is one part of it, but there is a lot more non-financial support that accelerator programs can give you. Be clear about what the accelerator program provides and see how it aligns with your requirement and try and maximize that. The second sort of piece of advice is, as you think through your fundraising, please understand that there are very few investors, as Karthik was saying, who look at land restoration as an investment philosophy. But most business models have multiple problems that you are solving. Try and find as much alignment to what are the focus areas for that investor, and that is your connect. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And thank you, Amanda and Karthik, for the opportunity.
Well, thank you guys so much. I think, since we've had the three presentations, I think we can ask everyone to be prepared to share their input on a few questions that might be coming up. I want to invite people to start to use the question and answer box. And I also would like to ask one of the questions that I have actually at this moment, which is, I think this one's going to be for Amit and Karthik. Specifically in Amit's presentation, you mentioned that you're looking for companies to become cash flow positive, hopefully within 3 to 5 years. Of course, sooner is always better. I wanted to ask a question about the difference between scalability and profitability in the businesses that you are analyzing for investment purposes. For instance, you're looking for an exit so that you can retrieve your money. Have you guys found that many companies are having exit events for you, or are some of your investments in convertible notes and turning into debt or something? For instance, some of these companies might be very cash flow positive, but I'm not sure what the market's like. I just wanted to hear from you guys what the market's been like as far as exit events and that scalability and profitability of the ventures you've been finding so far.
I will let Karthik answer first.
Okay. So we have traditionally been science and technology investors. So we do companies that are sometimes close to commercialization, but might take anywhere between 2 to 3 years to get to market with their product, right? So we are comfortable with companies that might not be generating revenues for a while. Once the companies move from kind of these early sales to having some traction around revenue is when we want to see good business dynamics in the company. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to have positive EBITDA, which is basically a proxy for positive cash flow. But what we want to see is that every new customer they get, ideally they have a thought process which says that the marginal economics of the business is improving. Now, in terms of exits, I think we actually have scenarios right now where we have companies that are raising just a Series A round, and we are getting offers for being bought out because of the IP that the business is bringing to market, right? But that aside, I think our investment horizons, at least at Sangam, is like 8 to 10 years, right? So we're not looking for exits early, but the idea for us is that we want to ideally back entrepreneurs who want to kind of create impact at scale, right? So we want you as entrepreneurs to kind of build that vision of being an organization that touches millions of lives, if not billions, right? And so given the scale of the opportunity, we do want at least quite a few of the companies that we support to basically grow in scale, and that would naturally bring us to exit scenarios. That said, within the rural prosperity framework that we are building, and that would include parts of the land restoration ecosystem, we most probably look at more kind of self-returning instruments like debt or revenue-based financing that allows for early stage companies to both take the capital to grow, so not have to kind of work around paying interest back to us early, but as they scale and kind of establish themselves as potentially good SMEs with good cash flow characteristics, maybe they can return our capital back and we can go back and support other entrepreneurs like that.
That sounds
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you please, you. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So Rupaya, when we think about exits, we think slightly different, given that we don't, most of the companies that we work with are not science and technology companies. They don't use a lot of, they do use technology, but that's not the main sort of business driver. The way how the companies we invest in are generally post revenue. So there's some customer paying for their product or service. And when we look at exits, I think initially we would look at exits like any other typical investor, with potential exit during follow-on rounds. Within our portfolio, there are at least a couple of companies that we are in sort of different stages of conversations of potential exit. But where I think we are now focusing on, which is where sort of that focus on positive cash flow is coming from, is those exits are going to be far and few in between, and that's sort of my honest assessment. Especially in sort of the segment that we work in, which is why we're looking at convertible notes more closely, or using that as an instrument, wherein within a period of 3 to 4 years, instead of converting it into equity, the entrepreneur is given the choice to create enough sort of cash balance that they can pay off the note and potentially give us an exit. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
That definitely answers my question. I really appreciate that. We have a question from Matthews Dunga, and he says, would investors be interested in funding a land restoration business, which has been proven to work well elsewhere in the world, that might be proposed in a new region?
Yes, absolutely. I think, if you go back to the potential pathways to scale slide where we talked about, you need to fund the pilot design to test the regenerative model and the value creation. If you have made something work in another region, maybe you have, proven quite a bit of that. So what you might be able to do is kind of move a level forward and then test anything that might be something that you're assuming might translate to a new region, but you need to make sure or confirm before you kind of risk more capital or more time. So you want to go through maybe a small project, maybe not, given you have the experience, not a pilot, but maybe a little slightly bigger, and kind of leapfrog into kind of the project financing, scale up financing mode, rather than just kind of starting with a pilot, right? So what that opportunity gives you is your ability to kind of shorten your time frame and move to a different set of investors that you might be able to talk to, including investors in that different regions, land restoration projects.
That sounds great. At this time, I would like to thank you for that answer. I want to launch our feedback poll. I think you should see it coming up. Want to ask everyone who's here to answer the 3 questions that we have. So just take some time to do that while we answer a few more questions. So yeah, definitely use that chat box, and definitely if you can start to fill out this feedback poll. I've got it right here, and I hope that people start doing so. I'll give you guys updates. I have another question, which is for most likely Moses Kimani, and the question is, when did you first realize that you needed funding, and how much, how did you determine how much it was? And during your journey of fundraising with different types of investors, what surprises did you have along the way?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think, when did you determine you needed funding? I think from the beginning, because we were setting out to do quite an ambitious initiative, working with farmers across the country to introduce a new way of farming, which requires a lot of training. So right from the beginning, I think in terms of surprises, what I would say is, so the investors where we went with previous introductions, either with from an accelerator or from a friend or a colleague, we moved much faster in terms of traction and just getting to the conversation to proceed, compared to cold call investors, the ones who just approached without any prior introduction. So that I think was a surprise. Something else that came up was the amount of time it takes to fundraise. I think it's you cannot underestimate the time and effort that is required while still running the business. So I think that's my advice to every entrepreneur, and every journey is different. But I think for us, just being patient and persistent, we are still in the process of doing our seed round. So we do hope to close that before the first half of the year. But I think it's not to underestimate the amount of time and effort it takes. And then in the meantime, before you do your large ticket raises, taking part in accelerators, competitions, applying for grants, or collaborating with different organizations does keep you going and does extend your reach and your impact as you continue to fundraise and before you turn around become cash flow positive. I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh yes, yeah, I think that does answer the question. I'm trying to see. I think that we are kind of running out of some questions here. So if anybody has questions, get them into the chat box. I did receive a question about the focus. One of the attendees is interested in working in Latin America. I let her know that we will be launching our applications for Latin America this April. So if you are from Latin America on here, watch out. We are going to have it. We'll let you guys know via email. And you can also check our website.
Amanda, maybe you want to also point out to all the work that WRI has put out around land restoration, as well as the FOLU report that actually we use called Prosperous Forests, which has a lot of case studies from across the globe.
Sure. So we at WRI, we are a nonprofit that has so many teams. We're about 1,000 folks around the globe, and we are always creating new resources, knowledge products. So I will put links to some of those in our follow-up email. We have publications about seeking financing for restoration businesses, about where we follow around 10 different business models around the world who have been able to scale to large sizes. We have publications such as the ones that Karthik has mentioned. So I'll be sure to highlight a few of those for follow-up reading. Karthik, do you have any other ideas or publications that you think I should add, or tips?
Yeah, I think all the publications that we used in our presentation are referenced. So you can actually go out once we share the slide decks to those publications and read more detailed case studies and also kind of the same structured thinking around how to talk about your projects or your companies and the impact that you're creating.
Let me see, I've got a few more questions that came in. Someone's saying, what are the plans for Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa? We have hosted the Land Accelerator in Kenya for all of Africa for the past 2 years, and we will be doing so again this October. So join us there. Applications are already open on our website, thelandaccelerator.com. The plans depend on the entrepreneurs who end up joining us. The entrepreneurs are leading the work that's being done in Africa, and the Land Accelerator is just meeting everybody where they are and providing those connects, the different practices that can really help change and create your strategy. So hope to have everybody here from Africa to join us. Check our website. Applications are live. Let's see. Niranjan has a question. Let's see. What are funding opportunities for re-givers? A lot of individuals are converting their lands into greenscapes. How does funding the landscapes look for re-givers? Niranjan, I don't know what a re-giver is. Is that a term that might be used in India? Do you guys understand what that is? Karthik and Amit?
No, but I think what Niranjan is looking at is basically more of philanthropic in greenscapes. So I think if there are companies, and we have met a few in India, that are actually doing the process of creating greenscapes or forests, both in urban and rural and degraded land. So what would be interesting is for individuals that are interested in providing their land as re-givers, if that's the term, to kind of come forward and maybe partner with us to kind of do pilots for companies that want to kind of prove some regenerative model.
Okay, well, I think that this might be all the questions we have for now. So I think we have one more that came in. Let's see what it is. Okay, no problem. We're gonna go ahead and ask each of the speakers to maybe share one takeaway that they'd like to share with people who are on this program today. Oh, yes.
To the Land Accelerator, if you're basically working on regenerating land, if you're working around regenerative agriculture, please do apply to the Land Accelerator, independent of where you think you are in your journey, whether you're kind of thinking that you're advanced stage or very early stage. Please do apply, because what we are trying to do is to bring forward the idea of land restoration to the overall ecosystem as well, right? So it's kind of your opportunity to be counted in how many entrepreneurs are out there in India working on this problem. So please do apply, and we will make sure to kind of reach out and connect with each one of you.
My words of wisdom would be, if you're applying for the Land Accelerator, clearly understand what you can get out of the program. Even if you have to talk to the team at Sangam, get maximum value, because there is certain time commitment that would be required, and to maximize that, really understand what the program offers and how it aligns with challenges that you are facing. Don't just look at it from a fundraising point of view.
And Moses,
And my words, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so my words of advice would be, especially for the more early stage entrepreneurs, I think you're working on a great initiative, on ambitious initiatives. So do persist. Look for as much independent feedback as possible. So whether it's from like accelerator programs like the Land Accelerator, from VCs, but also from peer entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who've gone a bit further in the journey. So that's usually quite useful to get all this feedback, and then still do follow your gut feel and your heart's ambition. So do take up a lot of feedback, but again, that you are there's something in you that you want to accomplish through your different enterprises. So keep that fire alive and keep that fire burning.
well, I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I want to thank our 3 speakers for their informative points of views that they shared and the inspirational words. I believe that it's really going to make a difference, in catapulting people, encouraging them to take advantage of opportunities in front of them. Don't feel like you're not good enough. Keep going forward, and really, when you believe in your dreams, you can move forward. So I know that everyone on this call, on this webinar, is a part of the community that's there to support and help you, and we're really looking forward to staying in touch. So I want to end the webinar there just by saying thank you, and we will be back in touch again and hope to have you apply to the Land Accelerator in the geography near you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye now.
Thanks, Amanda. Bye-bye.